Welcome to another gripping tale from the heart of the Wild West, a story of secrets, love, and redemption. Open it up. Now. The rancher did it. And then, he had a wife. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tell us, where are you watching from? Let's get started. The Wyoming sky stretched wide and endless, the dying sun pouring red light over miles of golden prairie. The evening wind carried dust across the land, brushing over dry grass and creaking fences. Eli Carter, a man built from sun, sweat, and silence, stood outside his ranch house, staring at the horizon like it owed him an answer. His hat sat low on his brow, shadowing eyes that had seen more years of loneliness than joy. The cattle moved slow and lazy, and the air smelled of hay, leather, and a life that never changed. For most men, the quiet meant peace. For Eli, it meant ghosts. Every sunset brought back the same question: why had his father left behind only debts, silence, and that locked iron chest in the barn? He'd inherited the ranch at 20, fought tooth and nail to keep it afloat, and turned down every offer to sell it. But no matter how many storms he faced, the mystery of that chest stayed buried in the back of his mind like a wound that never healed. That afternoon, just as the wind began to shift, a stranger rode up the dirt road. Eli's hand rested on the rifle leaning by the porch rail as the figure came closer. It wasn't a man, it was a woman, young, but with a kind of sharpness in her gaze that made her seem older than her years. Her hat was dusted from travel, and her coat had seen better days. She dismounted slowly, her boots hitting the ground with a confidence that caught Eli off guard. "Eli Carter?" she asked, voice steady despite the wind. He gave a slow nod, eyes narrowing. "Who's asking?" She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small, weathered envelope sealed with red wax. "Name's Lena Moore," she said. "I was told to bring this to you, when the time was right." Her tone carried no hesitation, no apology, just the certainty of someone fulfilling a promise. The wax seal glinted in the last light of day, stamped with the Carter family emblem. Eli's stomach twisted. He hadn't seen that seal since the day they lowered his father into the ground. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Lena's eyes softened, but her words stayed firm. "From my mother. She told me you'd understand." He didn't understand. Not even close, but something in her face, something familiar and painful, made him take the envelope. He didn't thank her. He just nodded toward the barn and told her there was a spare room if she needed it for the night. Inside, the fire crackled low as Eli sat at his wooden table, the unopened letter resting in front of him. His hands, rough and scarred from years of ranch work, hesitated as if touching something sacred. He remembered his father's voice, stern, secretive, always half a sentence away from telling the truth. The night outside deepened, coyotes howling in the distance, and Lena sat by the window, watching him in silence. Finally, she spoke. "He wanted you to have it, Mr. Carter. Whatever's in there, it's yours to know." Eli's jaw clenched. "My father wanted a lot of things. Most of them never happened." He picked up the envelope, feeling the weight of it. The seal cracked open with a soft snap, and inside was no letter, just a small, rusted key, tied with an old leather string. He turned it over in his palm, a cold shiver running through him. He knew this key. He'd seen it once before, in his father's hands, the day before the old man told him never to touch the chest buried beneath the barn floor. He rose from the table without a word. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots as he walked out into the night, lantern in hand. Lena followed him to the barn, the wind biting against their coats. Inside, the smell of hay and old wood filled the air. Eli set down the lantern, its golden glow revealing dust motes swirling like ghosts. He knelt beside a loose board near the far wall and pried it up with the back of a hammer. Beneath it, just as he remembered, was the iron chest, small, heavy, and marked with the same Carter insignia. He fit the key into the lock. It resisted for a moment, as if time itself didn't want to let go. Then came the sound, a low metallic click that seemed to echo through the barn. Lena stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Go on, open it up, now." Eli lifted the lid slowly. The hinges groaned, the smell of dust and age escaping like breath from a tomb. Inside lay several leather-bound documents, a pouch of gold coins, a faded photograph, and one folded sheet that looked newer than the rest. He picked it up carefully, unfolding it under the lantern light. It was a marriage certificate. His father's name was written clearly, James Carter. But below it, the bride's name made Eli's blood run cold. Margaret Moore. His eyes darted to Lena, whose last name matched perfectly. "What is this?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. She didn't flinch. "It means what you think it means," she said. "My mother was your father's wife." Eli stared at her, unable to breathe. "That's not possible," he muttered. "My mother," Lena cut in quietly, "wasn't his first." The truth settled over the barn like a storm about to break. For years, Eli had built his life on the memory of a man he thought he knew, a man who'd left him nothing but hard work and silence. Now he realized that silence had been hiding a second family. Another life. Another secret buried in the dust. He sat back on the dirt floor, the weight of it hitting him like a hammer to the chest. Lena knelt beside him, her expression a mix of sorrow and strength. "She never told me much," she said softly. "Only that he loved this land, and he loved you, even if he couldn't be both father and husband to two different homes." Eli's eyes burned, not with tears, but with something deeper, betrayal and pity twisted into one. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains, echoing through the valley. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows across their faces. Finally, Eli closed the chest, locking it again with trembling hands. "You should have stayed gone," he said roughly, standing up. But Lena didn't move. "Maybe," she replied, "but you deserve to know who you are, and what he left behind." Eli turned away, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a name he no longer understood. He walked out into the night, the rain beginning to fall in cold, heavy drops. Behind him, Lena placed her hand on the old chest and whispered to the darkness, "He'll open more than that, one day." The ranch stood silent under the storm, the wind howling through the fences like a restless ghost. Somewhere deep inside, the truth that had slept for 15 long years had finally been set free, and though Eli didn't yet know it, that truth would change everything he believed about love, blood, and the price of silence. The storm raged all night across the Wyoming plains. Lightning lit up the sky, casting flashes over the Carter Ranch, and rain hammered against the windows like the heavens themselves were angry. Inside, Eli couldn't sleep. He sat by the dying fire, staring at the iron chest sitting in the corner of the room. Every creak of the house felt like his father's voice whispering from the grave. Across the hall, Lena slept, or at least pretended to. Both of them were caught in a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. By morning, the sky cleared, but the air still smelled of rain and revelation. Eli saddled his horse and rode out before the sun had fully risen. He needed distance, from the ranch, from the truth, from her. The land stretched endlessly ahead of him, every fence post and hilltop a reminder of the man who built it all. He rode to the North Ridge, where his father used to sit and tell stories about building the Carter legacy. Now those stories felt hollow, built on lies and buried vows. Back at the ranch, Lena stood on the porch watching the horizon. The prairie wind tugged at her hair as she looked out toward where Eli had gone. She didn't blame him for running. Her mother had always said, "The truth don't heal easy, but it does clean the wound." Still, Lena felt a hollow ache deep in her chest, not just for her mother's pain, but for Eli's. The man had lived his whole life chasing honor, only to find his family name written in two different towns. When Eli returned that evening, his face was harder, quieter, but something had shifted in his eyes. He dismounted and walked past Lena without a word, straight to the barn. She followed him, stopping at the doorway. He was sitting beside the chest again, running his fingers along the old iron edges. "You came here for a reason," he said finally, not looking up. "What was it? Money, land, or forgiveness?" Lena stepped inside, shaking her head. "None of those. My mother made me promise to give you that letter and let the truth rest." Eli's voice was low, almost bitter. "Rest? You think truth like that ever rests? You just dug up my father's sins and handed them to me like a gift." Lena took a slow breath, her boots echoing softly on the barn floor. "You think I wanted to know this?" she said, voice trembling. "He wasn't just your father, Eli. He was the man who ruined my mother's name. You got the land and his pride. She got the shame." The words hung heavy between them, cutting deeper than either of them wanted to admit. For a long time, the only sound was the wind howling outside. Then Eli stood, his eyes meeting hers. "You could have stayed away. You could have burned that letter. She looked at him steadily. And what would that make me? Another Carter hiding from the truth. That hit him square in the chest. He turned away, his jaw tightening, hands trembling slightly as he picked up one of the old photos from the chest. His father stood beside a younger Margaret Moore, smiling. It was the first time Eli realized how much pain a single smile could hide. The days that followed were quiet but heavy with meaning. Lena stayed on at the ranch, helping with the horses, fixing fences, cooking meals neither of them enjoyed but both needed. They didn't speak of the past again, but something unspoken began to grow, a fragile understanding. Eli started to see the way Lena handled the land, careful, steady, like she respected every inch of it. She fit there, somehow. Like she belonged, and that scared him more than anything else. One night, as the full moon rose over the hills, Eli found himself walking toward the corral. Lena was there, brushing down one of the mares, her hair silver in the moonlight. He leaned against the fence, watching her in silence. Finally, he said, "You could leave tomorrow. Take the gold, start somewhere else." She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I could," she said softly, "but I think your father wanted us both here for a reason. Maybe this land wasn't meant to divide us." He didn't reply, but for the first time, he didn't look away either. Over the next few weeks, something began to heal, not in words, but in actions. Eli taught Lena how to rope cattle, she taught him how to forgive in silence. They shared stories by the fire, each one revealing a little more of who they were before the truth found them. One morning, she fixed his father's old hat, sewing the brim where it had torn years ago. When she handed it to him, Eli just stared at her for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because family doesn't end with blood," she replied. Then, one quiet afternoon, the town sheriff rode up to the ranch with a piece of paper in hand. "James Carter's estate was never closed proper," he said. "You're the rightful owner of every acre here, Eli. But there's one clause left, joint inheritance with Margaret Moore's heir." The sheriff tipped his hat to Lena before riding off. For a long time, neither spoke. The world had drawn its own lines, and the choice was theirs, fight it or make peace with it. Eli looked at Lena. "Looks like we're both stuck with this land," he said with a faint smile. Lena smiled back, a real one this time. "Then we make it ours," she said. And from that day forward, they did. The ranch slowly changed. The fences were mended, the barns repainted, and laughter, something that hadn't lived there in years, began to return. Eli found that he looked forward to hearing her voice in the mornings, to sharing the long rides and quiet evenings. The past still lingered like a shadow, but it no longer ruled them. Months later, on a summer evening painted gold by the setting sun, the town gathered by the chapel. The old preacher smiled as he watched the bride walk down the aisle in a simple white dress, her hair pinned with prairie flowers. The groom stood tall, hat in hand, eyes soft and certain. When Eli Carter took Lena Moore's hand in his, it wasn't just a union of two hearts, it was the closing of an old wound that had bled for too long. After the vows, as they stepped out onto the wooden porch, the sky stretched wide above them, vast, forgiving, and alive. The land that had once divided them now bound them together. The whispers in town said it was strange, even scandalous, but Eli didn't care. He'd spent a lifetime carrying his father's secrets, now, he carried only her hand. That night, as they sat together on the porch, watching the stars light up the Wyoming sky, Lena leaned her head against his shoulder. "He wanted you to open that chest," she whispered. "You did. Now you've opened everything else." Eli smiled faintly, his arm wrapping around her. "Yeah," he said, voice deep and calm. "Guess I did." The wind moved softly through the grass, the cattle lowed in the distance, and the old Carter ranch stood steady, not as a reminder of what was lost, but of what was finally found. The man who once lived with silence had opened his past, faced his truth, and found a love born from it. In a world where secrets buried deep could break a man, Eli Carter did the impossible. He opened the chest, and he opened his heart.